All right, well, here we are with First Nephi chapter 21. This is another Isaiah chapter that we've talked about last time. This one is comparing Isaiah chapter 49. So last chapter was Isaiah 48. Now this is chapter 49. So Nephi is putting these two chapters together. He's going to give us a series of these chapters out of Isaiah to teach us. Now this chapter of Isaiah is getting into the last days, prophecy for the future. Nephi's future, Isaiah's future, and even a little bit our future and some of our present as well. So some fun things we get to learn from this. One thing that was interesting about this idea of the last days and the Messiah coming in the last days to save his people, President Wilford Woodruff in 1896 had an interesting comment to say on this. He said, "The revelations that are in the Bible, the predictions of the patriarchs and prophets who saw in vision and revelation, the last dispensation of the fullness of times, plainly tell us what is to come to pass. The 49th chapter of Isaiah is having its fulfillment." So Wilford Woodruff saw in 1896 Isaiah chapter 49 as having an opportunity for fulfillment in our present day. So this would be a fun one for us to read and understand better. Monty S. Nyman observed that chapter 49 is one of the most important chapters in the whole book of Isaiah because it also clearly foretells the mission of the Latter-day Saints and the destiny of the land of America in connection with the house of Israel. Nephi interpreted the chapter as foretelling that the land of America would receive some of scattered Israel, while his brother Jacob applied it both to the Jews in Jerusalem and to the Gentiles. Chapter 49 is of such importance that it ought to be studied diligently by every member of the church. This is in his document, Great Are the Words of Isaiah. So it's a great book about Isaiah and his writings, basically. So really important for us to look at. So let's jump in and get started here. Verse 1, "And again hearken, O ye house of Israel, all ye that are broken off and are driven out because of the wickedness of the pastors of my people. All ye that, yea, all ye that are broken off, that are scattered abroad, who are of my people, O house of Israel, listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken ye people from far. The Lord hath called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name." Now this is really fascinating. He's talking about this. You're broken off and driven out. Why are they broken off and driven out? Because of the wickedness of the pastors of my people. The church leaders in Jerusalem are leading the people astray. And so they're going to be broken off. Again, Nephi and Lehi see themselves as partial fulfillment of this idea of Enoch's story of the olive tree, of the branches being grafted off the main branch and put into other trees and grafted in as well, scattering of Israel, and eventually a gathering of Israel back to the original tree. And so this Israel is being scattered, and they see themselves as their journey as part of that fulfillment of that prophecy. Now towards the end of verse 1, it talks about how the Lord hath called me from the womb, and that from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. This is, in a way, kind of a pre-mortal reference that Isaiah is giving us here, that Isaiah was called before he was born to be a prophet. Now this is really fascinating because if you get into the book of Abraham in the Pearl of Great Price, you see in the grand vision that Abraham had that God stood among the noble and great ones. And he says, "These I will make my leaders." So this is in the pre-existence. Abraham sees this vision of us as spirits before we come to earth, and God is already predetermining these are the ones that I'm going to call to be my leaders. Now, many are called, but few are chosen, because we still have our agency. We need to be willing to be faithful to fulfill what God has in store for us. He doesn't override our agency. We're not in a predestination type idea. We have the opportunities to serve and help, but if we don't, God will call somebody else to fulfill his works. Verse 2, "And he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, and made me a polished shaft. In his quiver hath he hid me." Now what's interesting in the book of Revelations is Christ's mouth is shown as a sharp two-edged sword. Just like this idea of my mouth is a sharp sword. Words or use of priesthood is what we can be thinking about this. The words Christ speak is a double-edged sword. It can be a defense for the righteous and an offense for the wicked. The same words. So this is like Isaiah is talking about. My mouth is a sword. So his words are there to either protect and defend those who are righteous, or to accuse and go after the wicked. Not attack the wicked, but be there to exert justice on the wicked. That's what the words of God do. And so this is what this is. Israel's being prepared to be like Christ, to be that group that goes into the world to help the world, to condemn the wickedness of the world, and to help the world become righteous. And I like the idea of hath made me a polished shaft. In his quiver hath he hid me. This is an arrow. So we're talking about swords and arrows. This is war metaphors, combat, basically, preparing for a future use. If you're in the quiver, you're ready, but you're not being used yet. Verse 3, and said unto me, thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. So the Lord is hiding Israel in the shadow of his hand, is clarified in the Doctrine and Covenants, where the Lord declares that the priesthood holders of this last dispensation are lawful heirs according to the flesh and have been hid from the world with Christ in God. That's section 86 of the Doctrine and Covenants, verses 8 and 9. This description of priesthood bearers as lawful heirs according to the flesh is a reference to the covenant which the Lord made with Abraham, that all nations of the earth would be blessed through the literal seed of his body, who would bear the ministry and the priesthood. We'll look at Abraham chapter 2 to get more reference on that. The Doctrine and Covenants also identifies Latter-day Israel as the seed of Abraham, section 103. The world did not know where scattered Israel was, but the Lord knew and had concealed them in his protective hand. So remember this, the allegory we talked about a little bit earlier, a couple of chapters ago, about the olive tree, the grafting. God knows where he put those grafts, but he didn't tell others to conceal them, to hide them and preserve them. We're going to see more of that in the book of Jacob. We get really into the allegory of the olive tree. So the polished shaft hidden in the Lord's quiver may be a direct reference to Joseph Smith. As the choice seer of the latter days, he was to be the Lord's servant in a special sense. The prophet Joseph's description of himself is interesting in this light. He said, I am like a huge rough stone rolling down from a high mountain, and the only polishing I get is when some corner gets rubbed off by coming in contact with something else, striking with accelerated force against religious bigotry, priestcraft, lawyercraft, doctorcraft, lying editors, suborned judges and jurors, and the authority of perjured executives, backed by mobs, blasphemers, licentious and corrupt men and women, all hell knocking off a corner here and a corner there. Thus I will become a smooth and polished shaft in the quiver of the Almighty, who will give me dominion over all and every one of them, when their refuge of lies shall fail, and their hiding place shall be destroyed, while these smooth and polished stones with which I come in contact become marred. So the arrow shaft is polished that it might fly truer and faster, and the shaft that is polished is generally reserved for one's most important shot. The last dispensation, when all things are gathered in one, is the Lord's most important shot. So he saved his polished shaft for this latter-day work. Joseph was called to give this generation the word of God, which recalls also the sharp sword analogy mentioned in verse 2. So this is again the article, Great Are the Words of Isaiah, or that book. So really fascinating, this idea of fighting. So again, the wicked, it's not going to go well. God's justice is going to go against you, basically. The righteous are going to be defended and protected by God, not by themselves, but by God. So let's look at this. Verse 4, then I said, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. Surely my judgment is with the Lord and my work with my God. So again, this is like Israel saying, I've tried. I tried to help the people. I've tried to do the best I could. I do this. Oh man, this is hard work. It is hard work to do what God wants us to do. Verse 5, and now saith the Lord that formed me from the womb, that I should be his servant, to bring Jacob again to him. Though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength. This is a verse that's often used in Christianity when they talk about finding strength in God to accomplish things. So the purpose of the servant is to bring Israel back to him. The servant is Israel as well. So Israel will bring Israel back. Could this be Joseph, Manasseh, and Ephraim saving the other tribes? Just as in the first part of the verse, the reference is to the spiritual Israel, so here it is to the elect among the Gentiles and to all Gentiles indiscriminately. For this reason, the view that identifies the servant with Israel fails. Israel alone never was the instrument of the world's redemption. Paul's use of this verse in Acts 13:47 supports the identification of the servant as the Messiah and his people. When his people labor in his name, as Paul and Barnabas were doing, he works through them. So here's some observations we can make from this verse here. And this is some of the things that Edward Young in his book, the Book of Isaiah, talks about. He says, 1, the Gentiles are in darkness and need light. They are not already redeemed, but are lost in the darkness of sin and ignorance. Hence the need for vigorous missionary work. One religion is not as good as another. Christ alone is the light of this dark world. The second observation he makes is Israel is the firstborn in the household of faith. Therefore, we Gentiles who have been brought in from without must love Israel and must bend every effort to bring the gospel to the Jews. The third observation that Edward Young gives is true unity is found in Jesus Christ alone, in whom both Jew and Gentile have become one. So when we follow Christ, we come in unity together. It doesn't matter our status in life, our class, our genders, our ethnicities, all of those go away when we come together in Christ. He is the ultimate identity for us to follow, to come to him and come together. Verse 6, and he said, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the ends of the earth. So to preserve, he says, to restore the preserved of Israel. Preserve is to keep for a later date. To protect from something bad. When you preserve something, you keep it so it doesn't go bad on you. It doesn't get destroyed or ruined. You keep it from something, a bad situation. So that's what the gospel is for, is to preserve us, to help us, to be prepared for what? Avoiding the second death. We've spent some time talking about already as well. And we get more into that in the book of Alma too. Verse 7, thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, his Holy One, to whom man despiseth, to him whom the nations abhorreth, to servant of rulers. Kings shall see and arise, princes also shall worship, because of the Lord that is faithful. So this is interesting because this is again talking about Jesus Christ as not being seen as favorable by kings. But yet when Christ comes in his majesty, they will revere him and recognize that they were wrong. So they didn't accept him the first time when they didn't perceive he had power over them. Once they realize he does have power over them, that is going to change their tune. They're going to go, yeah, okay, we get it. You can command the elements and you can do amazing things. We shouldn't mess with you, basically. Verse 8, thus saith the Lord, in an acceptable time have I heard thee, O isles of the sea. In a day of salvation have I helped thee. And I will preserve thee and give thee my servant for a covenant of the people to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages. So verse 8 is an interesting one. Isles of the sea oftentimes is talked about in the biblical sense as the Aegean Sea, the Greek islands that are out there. There's a whole bunch of islands up in that area. So that's often a reference to them, which is usually seen as the wisdom of the world. That guys, I'm here to help you. You need to follow God, and he will bless you and help you. It can be used to talk about minority groups, people who are not part of the main groups of people. God is there to help you. He's there to guide you and help. Verse 9, that thou mayest say to the prisoners, go forth. To them that sit in darkness, show yourselves. They shall feed in the ways, and their pastures shall be in all high places. Now, who are these prisoners that Isaiah is talking about here? There's a good chance that what Isaiah is dealing with here in verse 9 are those who make it to spirit prison. They live in this world, they die, they go to the spirit world, and they're in spirit prison because they haven't known who Christ is. And this is, go forth to them that sit in darkness. Spirit prison is darkness. Spirit prison is often mentioned as torture, as fire and brimstone, as a time of you paying for your own sins in a way. And so if you don't like that, then being taught the gospel is important. In the New Testament times, there was a story, and I can't remember if it was in the Gospel of Thomas they had this story or not, but it was in part of the apocryphal writings, that the people in the spirit world were waiting for Christ to come. And when they heard that he was on the earth, they were waiting at the gates in darkness. And then this light comes to the gates. This Christ himself is this image of emanating light, and he comes to the gates, and he breaks the lock and opens the gates and allows those who have accepted him to leave the prison. Because it wasn't until Christ's atonement was fulfilled that anybody could say the price was paid for them. And so they were all locked up because they couldn't get out. And so this is now Christ helping those in the spirit world. So now we have spirit prison and spirit paradise, a distinction between these groups. And so that's what a lot of people look at verse 9 and say, that's what he's talking about here in Isaiah, is going to do missionary work in the spirit world, basically. So this is an idea, this is like a call to come to the light, not just for them, but even for us. Come to the light. That's what our missionary efforts need to be out. Come with me as we go to the light of Christ. We focus on him, we center on him. He is the important component in the gospel. We need to follow him and keep his commandments. And that's what we should be doing, is going to that light and bringing other people to that light as well. So verse 10, they shall not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor the sun smite them. For he that hath mercy on them shall lead them. Even by the springs of water shall he guide them. So this is like the idea of travailing through the desert, going through this wilderness and struggling to get your basic needs met because it's a barren wasteland. And so God will guide you and help you to find the oases, to find the good places where you can get nourishment and nutrition. That's what he's saying there. In verse 11, he continues and says, I will make all my mountains a way, and my highways shall be exalted. So the highways is built up. So they're off the ground. They will be well known and easy to see and not have to go up and down hills, but they will make a way through the mountains. A straight way, in a lot of scriptures talk about that, bringing mountains low so that God can make his paths straight. Now this is an important metaphor for us because God doesn't wind in and out of mountains. He doesn't hide part of his path. It's clear. It is delineated out. This is the path to be on. Go this way. No surprises. Full transparency. That's what he talks about when we hear these scriptures, the mountains made low, his paths built up, the highway of the people made straight. There's no surprises. There's no, what's going to happen around the next corner. It's clear, it's transparent. God is there to make it easy for you to follow him. You just got to be willing to follow him and admit that I need to stay on this path. That's what it's all about. Verse 12, and then, O house of Israel, behold, these shall come from far. And lo, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim. Now, a lot of scholars think that this land of Sinim represents a land far away in the east, most likely, maybe over towards China. If you're thinking about like Jerusalem is the center, he talks about here going from the north and from the west in these lands of Sinim, possibly from the east, which could be like China, India, that area coming over basically. Verse 13, sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, for the feet of those who are in the east shall be established. And break forth into singing, O mountains, for they shall be smitten no more. For the Lord hath comforted his people, and will have mercy upon his afflicted. So in Isaiah's day, if we look at this, the east would have been the Orient, possibly even enemy nations. So again, he's coming from more Jerusalem area. So east would be like Iraq, Iran, Persia, Babylonia, further even like over towards India and into China and other places as well. So, and what's fascinating about this too is when we think about the east. Now, the other place where direction is commonly used in scriptures is in the books of Moses in Genesis. What happens to Adam and Eve? They go eastward. The garden is planted eastward in Eden. When they get kicked out of the garden, they are eastward of Eden. So there's a linear progression towards the east that Adam and Eve go through in their story, showing further and further away from God. Where does Christ come from? We hear in about the last days, he will come from the east. He's going to meet us where we're at and bring us back to God. So we talk about this, blessed are those who are in the east shall be established. These are like the missionary efforts. Those who have followed Christ are going to be coming to help us to find Christ and go back to God as well. So there's a lot of cool ways to look at these ideas here that we see that Isaiah is weaved into this. So a lot of great metaphors and structures to help us understand that it's missionary efforts. It's all about how do we help people come to Christ. That's what everything we should do. All the programs in the church, all the functions we do, it's all about how do we help people find Christ? How do we bring them to him? That's what it's about. Verse 14, but behold, Zion has said, the Lord hath forsaken me, and my Lord hath forgotten me, but he will show that he hath not. Now this is really interesting. When we look at this idea, this is Zion, so the chosen people of God, claiming God has forsaken us. He's not here. He's not helping us. So this is a limiting perception that Zion has, and God is not going to forget them. In fact, there's a metaphor he gives here in verse 15. For can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee, O house of Israel. And this is the most important part right here. Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands. Thy walls are continually before me. We're reminded that Jesus Christ has a reminder constantly of us and the need to help us in the palms of his hands. The sign of the cross, him being nailed to that cross through his hands, he knows it's a reminder of what he has done for us and that we still need his help and that he loves us. And so this is really an interesting idea that we see here. And ladies, I'd love to hear your perspective, because this is obviously a lesson, opportunity for learning from a woman's perspective on here. What does it mean to forget your child? If you have a baby you're taking care of, is it easy to just go, yeah, whatever, I don't care? What does it take for a woman to ignore that child? Women often have this innate ability, this innate desire to take care of children, to help children, to love and nurture children. So for a woman to forget, she has to basically ignore all of her natural feelings and ideas to forget that child, which means this is the Master Mahan principle at work, that she is forgetting even her own flesh, her own child, because her perceptions, her ideas are so messed up, so confused, that she's not even probably valuing her own life. And there's where God says, no, I'm not treating you guys like that. I remember. I will always remember and be here to help you out. Now, what's interesting, Calvin made a comment about this. In a word, says Calvin, the prophet here describes to us the inconceivable carefulness with which God unceasingly watches over our salvation, that we may be fully convinced that he will never forsake us, though we may be afflicted with great numerous calamities. That's from Edward Young's book, the Book of Isaiah. So if you think about it again, even though he's gone through trials himself, he's done things for us, he'll never forget us. He loves us and wants the best for us. He's here for us. We need to remember that even if we have hard times isn't God forgetting us. Hard times is God helping us. God giving us opportunities to grow and improve. So let's continue on here. Verse 17, thy children shall make haste against thy destroyers, and they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee. So this is, your children are going to be supporting and helping as well. Now, President Wilford Woodruff had an interesting comment to say about this. He said, this Zion of the Lord and all its beauty, power, and glory is engraven upon the hands of Almighty God, and it is before his face continually. His decrees are set, and no man can turn them aside. There never was a dispensation on the earth when prophets and apostles, the inspiration, revelation, and power of God, the holy priesthood, and the keys of the kingdom were needed more than they are in this generation, meaning the 20th century. There never has been a dispensation when the friends of God and the righteous among the children of men needed more faith in the promises and prophecies than they do today. And there certainly never has been a generation of people on the earth that has had a greater work to perform than the inhabitants of the earth in the latter days. That is one reason why this church and kingdom has progressed from its commencement until today, in the midst of all the opposition, oppression, and warfare which have been waged against it by men inspired by the evil one. If this had not been the dispensation of the fullness of times, the dispensation in which God has declared that he will establish his kingdom on the earth, never more to be thrown down, the inhabitants of the earth would have been enabled to overcome the kingdom of Zion and God in this as well as any former dispensation. But the set time has come to favor Zion, and the Lord Almighty has decreed in the heavens that every weapon formed against her shall be broken. That's Journal of Discourses, volume 15, pages 8 and 9. So he's saying there, I'm here to help you. This is the last time we're going to make it work. It's going to be different than previous times, basically. Your enemies are going to go away. They're not going to be successful. Now, verse 18 is a good admonition here. He says, lift up thine eyes round about, and behold, all these gather themselves together, and they shall come to thee. As I live, saith the Lord. So this is a covenant. He's making just as they would say, swear to me on your life or your mother's life. So this is, as I live, saith the Lord. Thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all, with an ornament, and bind them on even as a bride. Now, I like this. This is really fascinating, that what he's talking about here is really interesting. If we look at verse 19, for thy waste and thy desolate places, and the land of thy destruction shall even now be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants, and they that swallow thee up shall be far away. So this is, again, these ideas of us overcoming the problems and challenges we have. God is going to help us to overcome, subdue our enemies. The church of God, his gospel will prevail over everything else. That's an important point. Now, what's fascinating about this is we're talking about being clothed and having him as an ornament and being a bride. Where this is so important, because in Isaiah we get the allegory of the bride and the bridegroom, a powerful allegory. This is temple language. Think about it from an LDS temple standpoint. Thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all as with an ornament, and bind them on even as a bride, coming to God, willing to be submissive to him, to follow him. We need to act like a bride, which means we need to think from a woman's perspective to understand our relationship with Jesus Christ. Ladies, never discount your value to helping the world understand the gospel of Jesus Christ. God has taught through Isaiah the importance of a relationship with Jesus Christ through your perspective, through your way of thinking. That's what Isaiah has done. Isaiah is a book written for women, and women have the ability to teach the rest of the world how to come to Christ. That's why we need women scholars. We need more women to understand Isaiah. This is so powerful. This is the real message of Isaiah. And this is what we're getting here in Nephi as well. So let's continue on with this. Verse 20, the children whom thou shalt have, there's a feminine trait, giving birth, after thou hast lost the first, shall again in thine ear say, the place is too strait for me, give place to me that I may dwell. Then shalt thou say in thine heart, who hath begotten me these, seeing I have lost my children and am desolate, a captive, and removing to and fro. And who hath brought up these? Behold, I was left alone. These, where have they been? Now, this is really an interesting thing we have to think about, okay? There's a little bit of backstory to understand what's going on here, because in the book of Isaiah is this metaphor of the bride. So this is a story of a woman who is betrothed. She's engaged to get married to the bridegroom. In this story, she decides to break off the wedding. She doesn't want to get married anymore. She wants to get divorced. She wants out of the relationship. Now, in the Old Testament times, in that culture, a woman could not ask for divorce. She couldn't get out of a divorce on her own. There was no such thing as a no-fault divorce. You couldn't just file and it's done. If she wanted out, her husband had to let her out. If her husband didn't want her to leave, he didn't file. He didn't instead. So she was 100% dependent on her husband going through with a divorce. If he doesn't go through with it, she can't get a divorce. Jesus confronts a woman at the well, if you remember in the New Testament times, who is in a similar situation. She has a husband, but she's not living with her husband. So there's this problem that's going on, okay? This is the culture of the time. So in Isaiah, the bridegroom tries to mend the relationship, but his bride won't have it. So he actually gives the divorce to her. He says, okay, if what you want is to be separated from me, then I will let you be separated from me. And he divorces her, thus freeing her to do what she wants. She ends up spending a whole lot of time sleeping with a lot of other men, and actually gets to the point where she's paying the men to sleep with her. That's how depraved it gets. It's a crazy story. Go watch all our videos about Isaiah, and we'll get into the details of that. But here's what the problem is. Okay, they didn't have contraception back then, so if a woman is having a lot of sex, she's eventually going to get pregnant and have a baby. And they were getting rid of the babies. They were throwing them to the side. And then when she eventually decides to come back to her husband, when she gets so depraved that not even paying men to sleep with her is working, she hits total rock bottom. There's nothing left. She decides, I should go back to my husband, that one guy that actually did care for me and take care of me. She goes back to mend fences with him to say, I want to get back into our relationship covenant with you again. He goes, okay, I will take you back. And as they get back together, she finds out that he's got a house of children. And she's like, where did these kids come from? What happened to these kids? And he says, well, these are your kids. And she says, my kids? What are you talking about, my kids? And he's like, well, yeah, you kept having kids with all these other men, and then you threw them out. I kept them. I kept watching you and helping you the whole time. And I have raised them, and now they are yours. That's what she's talking about here. She is saying, this is in verse 21. She's going, wait a minute here. These are my kids. What's going on here? So verse 22, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will lift up mine hand to the Gentiles and set up my standard to the people, and they shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. So this is Isaiah saying Israel has gone away from God. The Gentiles will be given the chance of having the gospel, and they will bring your descendants back. So Israel is restored through their descendants, and the Gentiles will be facilitating this encouragement to return and go back. Some people point to this as the idea of literally going back to Jerusalem, to Israel. Some see this more spiritually or metaphorically of missionary work from Gentile nations to non-Gentile nations, to more Jewish nations. I think either way is a decent way to look at this. Verse 23, and kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their face towards the earth, and lick up the dust of thy feet. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord, for they shall not be ashamed that wait for me. So kings and queens, governments, will be worshiping and realizing we need to take care of Israel. We need to follow Israel. Israel is where it's at. We need to be following them. So governments helping and serving Israel at some point. Some people say that's more literal, like we can, America's connection with the nation of Israel right now. I think this is still a more future tense situation when they realize that the world is depraved and Israel actually has good stuff. And they have resources and they are worth working with, basically. And this could be literal Israel. This could be more spiritual Israel of anybody who is joining God's kingdom. Verse 24 now, for shall the prey be taken from the mighty, or the lawful captives delivered? Now this is interesting. Joseph Smith actually adjusts this verse in the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. So what he's talking about here is the covenant people of the Lord. So Joseph Smith said, but thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered, for the mighty God shall deliver his covenant people. So this is not about robbing the mighty. This is about realizing that those who have taken advantage of the people of Israel will no longer be able to do that. God will save them from these worldly problems, these worldly bullies that are fighting them. Verse 25, but thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. For I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save thy children. I will feed them that oppress thee with their own flesh. They shall be drunken with their own blood, as with sweet wine, and all flesh shall know that I, the Lord, am thy Savior and thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. So the wicked are going to basically suffer the problems of the wickedness. The way they oppress other people, they're going to be oppressed the same way. God is going to save the children of Israel. And that's this bride. Israel is the bride, and the descendants that she is bringing forth in the world, God is going to gather them together to bring them back, to restore those covenants as a whole family once again. Such a powerful metaphor, absolutely powerful metaphor that we get. There's temple language in this, covenants, dressing up, marriage, making those connections with each other. There's so many wonderful things for us to learn from Isaiah. So hopefully you're starting to see this. If you want to learn more, we've done all the videos on Isaiah. You can watch those to get more information on those as well. But hopefully you can start to see why Nephi is putting these into the Book of Mormon for his people to remember of, guys, you're part of Israel. You're part of this fulfillment. We need to stay with God. We need to do what he wants us to do. This is important. So let's jump over to the next chapter as we continue forward.